How accurate is Hamilton to the historical events it's based on? Lin-Manuel Miranda's smash hit accomplished the impressive feat of turning the life of one of America's founding fathers into a Broadway musical. But how well does it stick to the true history of the American Revolution? Let's separate the facts from the fiction in Hamilton. The Hamilton musical delves into a surprising love triangle between Alexander Hamilton and two of the Schuyler sisters, Eliza and Angelica. While Hamilton ended up marrying Eliza, the musical depicts Angelica as harboring intense romantic feelings toward him, and even shows the two having a love affair before Hamilton's wedding to Eliza. It's true that historians have discovered instances of flirtatious talk between the two and interesting comments in private letters. Indeed, one letter sees Angelica jokingly telling her sister Eliza, "If you were as generous as the old Romans, you would lend him to me for a little while." However, in reality, Angelica had been married for a few years already before her sister and Alexander Hamilton got engaged themselves, and she wasn't even in the country the day of their wedding. Interestingly enough, in 1799, Angelica's husband John Barker Church also had a duel against Aaron Burr, who would go on to kill Hamilton in a later duel, but neither man was injured. Based on another flirtatious correspondence Angelica held with none other than Thomas Jefferson, it's clear that the eldest of the Schuyler daughters had a way with men. So, is Hamilton's love triangle based in fact? Yes. Despite slavery not being a major subject of the musical, some scholars have pointed out that Hamilton's abolitionist stances in the story may have been exaggerated. For example, there is a scene where the titular character calls Thomas Jefferson a slaver, and in a later scene he calls out the South for not having to pay for labor, alluding to their exploitation of slaves. Then, at the very end of the musical, Hamilton's wife reflects on how he would have continued to fight against slavery if he was still alive. Indeed, this portrayal of Hamilton as a staunch abolitionist comes mainly from Ron Chernow's biography of Hamilton, which the musical is based on. However, historians aren't sure if this is a very accurate presentation of the founding father. While he was a founding member of the New York Manumission Society, which did push for an emancipation law, and Hamilton did in fact criticize Jefferson's racist beliefs, on the other hand, Hamilton's own father-in-law owned slaves, and it's possible that Hamilton did too. Interestingly, Lin-Manuel Miranda himself has addressed this topic himself in an interview with NPR. Indeed, he stated that although Hamilton voiced anti-slavery beliefs, he remained complicit in the system, and other than calling out Jefferson on his hypocrisy with regard to slavery, doesn't really say much else in the show. Then, he goes on to add, "I think that's actually pretty honest. He didn't really do much about it. None of them did enough." Historian Nancy Isenberg has even gone so far as to say that Aaron Burr was actually a more progressive politician than Alexander Hamilton, writing that Burr was in most ways more forward-thinking by our standards than his nemesis Hamilton, and the romantic recasting of Hamilton's life story comes at the expense of a true progressive champion. So, was Alexander Hamilton really as progressive and anti-slavery as his depiction in the musical? No. In the musical, the three daughters of Senator Philip Schuyler Angelica, Eliza and Peggy, are depicted as progressive, even feminist figures who aren't afraid to voice criticisms of their society's unfair treatment of women. However, in reality, the Schuyler sisters were socialites, and there is no evidence that they held any feminist beliefs. While the sisters were certainly well-educated and very well-spoken and articulate, they were not engaged in any political activity, which would have been very rare for women in America at the time. So, were the Schuyler sisters really feminists? No. One of the most shocking portrayals in the musical is perhaps Thomas Jefferson's. Indeed, Jefferson, played by Daveed Diggs, is portrayed as a flamboyant and aggressive figure, often involved in political infighting. However, it appears that Lin-Manuel Miranda and the cast took some liberties with their depiction of the American president. Indeed, according to historical evidence, Thomas Jefferson was actually the opposite of how he is portrayed in the show. While Hamilton presents as confrontational and sharp-tongued, in reality, Jefferson was a relatively calm and quiet character, who was much more measured and careful in his political affairs. In fact, unlike their characterization in the musical, Hamilton and Jefferson's early relationship was fairly agreeable. Indeed, Jefferson even suggested Hamilton be nominated for a position in the prestigious American Philosophical Society. Despite this, the musical only depicts the two founding fathers' dynamic as adversarial in order to make the story more interesting. So, is the musical's portrayal of Thomas Jefferson accurate? No. One of the most fascinating aspects of the story is how Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr basically lived parallel lives. Indeed, both men were orphans. Both served under George Washington in the Revolutionary War, and they both even passed the bar and set up law practices the exact same year. A lot of that parallel narrative is from Chernov's biography, and it definitely makes the lead-up to the two characters' tragic duel even more dramatic. But how historically authentic is the show's presentation of the two men's lives and relationship with each other? Well, it appears that their relationship was actually exaggerated for the musical. Indeed, Hamilton presents Burr as being involved in a number of important dramatic moments, like exposing Alexander's affair with Maria Reynolds, and later confronting him about his financial fraud. However, in reality, Burr wasn't involved in these confrontations. Similarly, the musical treats Hamilton's vote for Thomas Jefferson as the deciding vote that put an end to Aaron Burr's presidential bid in 1800. And while it's true that he did lobby the House Federalists to support Jefferson, Hamilton didn't really have the kind of power to influence the vote single-handedly, or be blamed entirely for Burr's loss. Of course, Burr did actually kill Alexander Hamilton in their famous duel. However, even this is presented slightly inaccurately in the musical. The actual duel took place in 1804, not straight after the 1800 election. So, is Aaron Burr and his relationship with Hamilton correctly depicted in the show? No. One of the most interesting and unexpected parts of Hamilton is what happens after the main character dies. Indeed, at this point in the show, the story is taken up by other figures, most notably Hamilton's widow, Eliza. Here, Eliza takes it upon herself to continue spreading her late husband's story and legacy. Indeed, the infamous Hamilton-Reynolds affair, in which James Reynolds blackmailed Alexander over his affair with his wife, Maria, led to Hamilton's private life being exposed in a cruel manner. By extension, this also deeply affected Alexander's own wife, Eliza. Therefore, by choosing to retell her husband's story after his death and continue his legacy, Eliza was also attempting to rewrite her own narrative after the public humiliation of the Reynolds affair and change her public perception. In the end, Eliza is depicted trying to keep Hamilton's legacy alive by interviewing war veterans, raising funds for the Washington Monument, speaking out against slavery, as well as creating the first private orphanage in New York, the Orphan Asylum Society. This really happened, and she also established the Hamilton Free School in Manhattan, which offered schooling for families who couldn't afford a private education. So, did Eliza really commit herself to keeping Hamilton's legacy alive after his death? Yes. In conclusion, while Hamilton manages to turn the life of one of America's least well-known founding fathers into an incredibly entertaining Broadway musical, it often does so at the expense of historical accuracy. That's all for this video examining the fact and fiction of Hamilton. What was the most enjoyable part for you? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more fascinating content exploring the difference between movies and reality.